check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. Check, check. Hello, check. Check, check, check,
Testing,
check,
testing.
check. Check.
Check. Can
Put
you
it,
hear me?
put it right up to your chin is like
Oh
a good
fuck.
half.
Okay, is this better?
I'm just gonna check the stream now.
Shit. Do we need to like turn up the volume?
I can turn it. Oh.
Okay, sweet.
Sorry, I'm
What's
just
up?
gonna have to get out of this somehow.
It's not as good. You said F11?
That would make sense. Fit on does it. There we go. Okay.
This is. So,
Hello. Can you hear me? Thumbs up in chat. Do we have a chat? Okay. Cool. Okay.
Okay, so I'll ask Mario.
Okay.
we are. Oh. We are going to get started in just a minute, so please find a seat so that we can make sure we have enough seats. And then we'll get started in just a minute.
Testing, testing. Can I? No.
Okay, everybody, just a quick show of hands. Is there anyone who it's their first time coming out to a Trajectory Labs event? Okay, we have a couple. No. So just to give you guys a little bit of information about what we do and then some housekeeping information. So Trajectory Labs is an AI safety nonprofit. We're worried about the most kinds of extreme and existential risks. And so we kind of try to form a community around safeguarding against these risks in 3 ways. One is events like these where you can come learn from members of our community. Another is providing kind of a 9 to 5 and after hours research space for people who are working on AI safety. And then finally, also just kind of like facilitating a peer network. So that means if you have an opportunity that you think is relevant to people in working in AI safety, or you're looking for such an opportunity, you can come here, talk to us, and we can maybe help you navigate this. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please talk to me, Mario, or any one of the many Trajectory Labs members that you'll see throughout the night. Now, just a couple housekeeping rules. The glass doors there, if you get a phone call or something like that and you go outside the glass doors, we will hear you. If you go down the hall that way, we will hear you. If you go down the hall this way, we will hear you. What's the solution to this? Go like much farther than you think you need, or preferably don't take a phone call at all, or preferably get behind a door somewhere, like a not glass door, and take a phone call. Additionally, if you haven't already checked, washrooms are down the hall and to the right. And I think that is all of our, typically we do Slido, so that's where you like scan and enter the questions. We're not doing that tonight. And also because kind of Leo has a longer presentation prepared, what we're gonna do is save all questions for the end. So if you have a question, unless you think it's like a really essential clarifying question, please leave it to the end. And then at the end when we're asking questions, in order so that everyone on the live stream can follow along, please just raise your hand and then wait for me to come up to you with the mic. That way everyone who's following along on live stream can hear your question and get the full context for the answer. I think that is everything. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Leo now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I've got some voice issues today, so I'm not going to be my usual booming self, so I'm going to have to is this loud enough for everybody to hear? Can you all kind of, can you turn up? Yeah, I'm sorry. This is, yeah. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. Can you guys hear me? Okay, this feels like it's better, maybe. Can the audience hear me now? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Maybe that was okay. Closer to my face? This is, I mean, it's, yeah, I can't get, I can eat the mic, I guess. Okay, like this is better? Okay, Jesus. I guess sanitize this mic afterwards. I don't know. Okay. More. Okay. Sorry, this is, the usual technical difficulties, it's fine. I caused these. This is my fault. I like it. This is the regular volume I'm going to be speaking at. Can everybody hear this? Okay, sweet. I'm seeing nods. Okay. So a thing happened between Anthropic and the Department of War, and I want to talk about it. If you want to follow along, you can hit that QR code. This will take you, this is a link to the slides. The slides are very well annotated. All of the sources that I've gotten for everything that happened here are links that you can go to and check out the original source for. I encourage you to do that. Before we get to what actually happened, we need to talk about impact level for government information. I guess actually, before we even get to this, hi, I'm Leo. This is my first time giving a policy talk. Usually I'm one of the tech nerds, so I'm more on the programming side of things. This is going to be my first time trying to grapple with a thing that is 80 to 90% not tech. This is mostly about policy, and so this is mostly me trying to get my head around sort of concepts in government and concepts in various governance situations. If I'm spending too much time on something, tell me, or if I'm going too fast on something, tell me to slow down and I can do that. Either way, it works. Okay. Before we get to the actual thing that happened between Anthropic and... Sorry, it looks like some people can't hear. Yeah. Is this... Are you okay now? Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you. So there's 5 different designations for information. There is no IL-1 and there is no IL-3. There apparently used to be, and then they abolished them. I don't know why. It wasn't my fault. IL-2 is unclassified information. This is stuff that can be public. IL-4 is controlled unclassified information. So this is things like PHI. This is stuff that you don't necessarily want to be public, but if it were to leak, it's not a national security incident. IL-5 is things that might be national security incidents. So an example of IL-5 information is things like military facility locations or critical infrastructure vulnerability assessments. This is stuff that we have this information on file. It's not technically classified, but we also don't want it getting spread around. IL-6 is secret information. This is stuff that we don't want anywhere in the real world. This is specific real-time troop positions, movement orders during active operations, things like that. My understanding is that Signalgate, if anybody remembers that, that was an example of a leak of IL-6 information. And there's top secret SCI information. This is sort of less important, less relevant to the topic of the talk, because the first thing that we're starting out with actually is way back in November 7th, 2024, Anthropic, Palantir, and AWS make a deal to make Claude the first AI model on classified networks, IL-6. The important part about IL-6 networks is that it gives you access to real-time battleground data. So if you want to do things like target acquisition work for the military, or you want to do things like threat assessments for the military as part of an operation, you need to be able to deal with IL-6 information. If you can't, then you're not usable in those things in real time. Later in 2024, in November, the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund also begins using Claude for ESG screening. And this is just to show that this isn't just a thing that's happening in the US. Governments sort of across the world are starting to incorporate AIs into their policies and into their sort of workflows. There's real policy decisions being made on the basis of outputs from Claude or outputs from some of these other AIs. In January 2025, Microsoft Azure OpenAI receives top secret information. So this is higher than IL-6 technically, but it doesn't necessarily involve the real-time aspect of data. These are things like nuclear weapon plant schemas, or I don't know what else. I've got some examples in here. Zero-day exploits that the US holds against adversaries, things like that. On June 6th, 2025, Anthropic launches Claude.gov. So these are custom fine-tuned models, not just Claude in a secure wrapper. So back in the original time point, in November 7th of 2024, this was literally just, there is Claude, and there are now instances of Claude running on networks that have access to IL-6 data. As of June 6th, 2025, this is no longer the case. Those models running on IL-6 data are now materially different than the Claude that you have access to. They are fine-tuned on government processes and procedures, and fine-tuned for certain tasks that they're running on the inside. July 15th, 2025, the Pentagon CDAO awards $200 million ceiling contracts to Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, and XAI. And these are so this is the first time that I heard of this term. These are IDIQ contracts. What this means is we take some amount of the thing that you're producing on an indefinite time scale, on an indefinite delivery schedule, and we're paying you up to $200 million in exchange for that stuff. So they want to start using tokens from Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, and XAI in a pretty big way. XAI was apparently a late addition to this, but all this to say that hypothetically, if Anthropic said, okay, wait, we're backing out of all of this, they're not the only, this would not stop the US government from using AIs in whatever way they wanted to. There's other companies out there that can do this. In September of 2025, it was still the Department of Defense, by the way. We're talking all of the timeline points that we've hit so far have been pre-Department of War designation. In September 2025, XAI and pens the OneGov deal. So Grok is available to all federal agencies for 42 cents per org for 18 months. I had to actually sit down and research what this means. This is a ridiculously low price. Usually when AI providers provide contracts to consumers, it's along the lines of some amount of money per million tokens. So in other words, you're paying per the tokens that you're using. In the Grok case, they charged 42 cents per org, which is effectively free, right? I think I used more than this in order to compile this presentation. And also, this is a full sort of all-you-can-eat deal for 18 months. So the thing that I took away from this data point is Grok really, really, really wants government contracts. They want to be one of the models that gets to serve this niche. Okay. September 2025, White House officials first frustrated by Claude's law enforcement limits. I put this in here only because this is the first instance that I could find of any kind of statement like this. It's not the case that this is substantiated. We don't know what these statements are. We don't know specifically who the staffers are. We know that there was some roadblocks when attempting to use Claude for surveillance tasks by the FBI. This is not necessarily military use yet, is my understanding. So, kind of background comment, but I think this is the first sort of note of disharmony that you can detect between, like in retrospect, that you can detect between Anthropic and White House officials. December 2025, so at this point we are Department of War. The renaming has happened. Google Gemini on GenAI Mill at IL5. So this is, Gemini now has access to IL5 information, which means that they can do some non-battlefield logistics for the military, right? They can do things like out-of-battle troop deployments. They can do things like, I don't know, deal with logistics chains for military bases that are not classified. They can't yet do the thing that Claude can do, which is in operation target acquisition work. And an example of that is January 2nd, 2026. Maduro is captured, and Claude is used without incident. The way that Claude was used in this operation was by, so first off, everybody, I'm assuming, has heard about the Venezuela raid that captured Maduro. Okay, cool. They were using it in flight for target acquisition and threat assessment capabilities. So, like, this was, I'm not 100% sure what the real use case is, but I'm assuming based on the systems that are involved, and this is something along the lines of, we are capturing map and satellite and camera data, running it through Claude or similar models, and then asking it to extract information about from those feeds to tell us, like, where is Maduro likely to be right now, what are high priority targets, what should we be aiming for, that kind of thing. I'm not sure this was the first time that this ever happened, but this is the first sort of time that I've confirmed that Claude was used for real in field conditions in an operation like this. On January 9th, 2026, Hegseth circulates the internal woke AI memo. The internal DOW document frames Anthropic safety constraints as ideological. This is half true, and we'll get to what I mean by that in later slides of the timeline. I don't know that the phrasing woke AI means anything necessarily, but it is the case that at least part of Anthropic's restrictions are ideologically based. Part of them are not, and like where the lie is and where it's not is worth discussing later on. On January 12th, 2026, the DOW AI strategy is published, and it formally mandates any lawful use in all contracts within 180 days. So this is the first point that we might have a heads up of, hey, this thing you're doing where you're saying there are certain uses that we can't put your technology to, that stops, that's done. If a use is lawful and we want to use it for that use, we will use it for that use, and you're going to let us. January 15th, 2026, GSA internal assessment. The GSA is the General Services Administration. So this is the procurement arm of the U.S. government. These are the people that go out and figure out, okay, what kinds of software do we need? How many licenses do we need for them? Where are they going to be deployed? This sort of thing. So GSA internal assessment, Grok does not meet safety and alignment expectations for federal use. So described internally as sycophantic, overtly compliant, and susceptible to manipulation. This is escalated to a White House chief of staff. The Pentagon clears Grok anyway over the GSA's objection. Grok is now, in theory at least, it has access to the same sorts of information that Claude has and is able to provide the same sorts of services to the government. I'm not sure whether this was more to... It would have been much harder to negotiate with Anthropic about what the DOW wants to put their technology to use for if it was the case that Anthropic was the only company that had access to a technology that could provide the service. Whereas clearing Grok at least does the job of, hey, if you don't like it, we'll use this slightly worse model, but at least we'll be able to use it for all of the things that we want to use it for in battlefield situations. In late January, Anthropic executives contacts Palantir to ask about Claude's role in the Maduro raid. So this is This is another one of the things that I put in as like in retrospect, you could see this as a note of discord between Anthropic and the Pentagon. This is brought back in a few of the Department of War's filings about as evidence that Anthropic did not approve of the uses to which the Department of War was putting Claude. These weren't actually voiced as disapproval. I can't find direct quotes about this. All I know is that at some point in January, someone from Anthropic contacted someone at Palantir and asked the question, hey, did you guys use Claude when you were doing the Madura raid? And this was interpreted as sort of disapproval of the fact that it was being used this way. February 13th, The Guardian publishes a story on Claude's role in the Venezuela raid. So this is now mainstream media coverage. So we know that this was used in the raid. The internal Department of War Anthropic friction moves out of the industry press. The Guardian is like mainstream media. On February 16th, according to Axios, and so all of these are links, so go to the original articles and read the sources if you doubt any of this stuff. Axios reports, Hegseth is close to cutting ties. Our nation requires partners willing to help our warfighters win in any fight. This is Department of War spokesperson talking about how they are going to try to force the all lawful uses clause. February 19th, Pentagon CTO Emil Michael publicly urges Anthropic to cross the Rubicon. I'm not clear, based on this quote, whether Emil Michael knows too much or too little about history. Because that is like a really unfortunate choice of words. But what he's trying to get Anthropic to do is relinquish their red lines. What they want is to be able to use Claude for all lawful purposes, and not all lawful purposes other than the two red lines that that Anthropic is worried about. On February 23, XAI/Grok, this is the same thing. Grok is the name for the XAI. Classified deal confirmed, and it accepts all lawful purposes with zero safety restrictions. So this is the first one that I know of the big, I guess frontier-ish. I'll call Grok frontier. Accepts all lawful purposes clause with zero reservations. In other words, even if Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini sort of had hang-ups about this, Grok is there to sort of toe the all lawful purposes line. Okay. February 24th, Hegseth meets Amadei at the Pentagon and gives him an ultimatum. Accept all lawful purposes by 5 p.m. Friday, February 27th, or face a supply chain risk designation or a DPA invocation. These are two threats. We'll get into both of them in a sec. The only thing that I want to note about this particular line item is there's not any indication that Dario knew that this was coming. This was an ultimatum that was just sort of handed to him at the meeting. There wasn't documentation going back and forth. There wasn't even tweets communicating via tweets. On February 26th, so one day ahead of the deadline, Dario publishes a detailed public statement and stands firm on the two red lines. So they say no. They say, no, you don't get to cross these. What are the red lines? Red line number 1, mass domestic surveillance. So this is something that Anthropic does not want to do. What the Department of War wants to be able to do is basically take all of the information that they have about Americans, throw Claude at it, and like this information involves things like geolocation, things like browsing history. So like if you have a Facebook account, if you've been talking, I don't know, if you called Trump some mean name or something, all of this is in that data corpus, all of your financial records, all of your data, all of the things that they can get from data brokers. They want to be able to run Claude over all of that, presumably to ask it to do things like, hey Claude, here's a bunch of data about US citizens that we think are problematic. Could you please find us some crimes? Currently this is legal. Like there's no law that prevents them from doing this. This is totally just a thing they can do. And also, we're in Canada right now. You notice the word domestic in there, which means that whether or not they're doing this to American citizens right now, they 100% are doing it to us. I'm not even really sure how safe American citizens are from this because of the Five Eyes arrangement, which is there's 5 countries that promise to spy on each other's citizens and then share that information so that really everybody gets equally spied on. We're all happy in being spied on. This is the part where, so do you remember when I said, when Hegseth said that the limits that Anthropic was trying to place on the DOW actions was ideological? This is the part where that's not a lie. There is no law that prevents the government from doing this. They just think that this is a really bad idea and don't want the DOW to be able to do this. I think if you ask Dario about what the deal with this is, his position would be something like, this is something that should be illegal and it isn't yet because we haven't gotten up and written legislation about it. So we're not going to do it until we resolve that. And if we come together and resolve this and say, oh, actually, mass domestic surveillance is totally fine legally, maybe he walks back on this and says, yeah, okay, cool. Right now, the compromise that they struck was FISA authorized targeted surveillance. So no, hey, Claude, here's all of the information we have. Please find us some crimes. But yes, things like, oh, Claude, here's all the information we have about these already suspected terrorists and criminals. Find us more of their crimes. That's totally fine. Okay. Second red line is fully autonomous weapons. So I think the phrase that gets used for this is something like lethal weapons with no humans in the kill chain. So the thing that AI does right now is things like threat assessment and things like target acquisition. So it is totally routine and possible and allowed for an AI to like take information about a battlefield space and provide information to human warfighters about these are the targets you have, these are the triggers you need to pull, these are the places where you need to put the bombs and bullets, and then the humans go and put the bullets and the bombs in the right places, right? Sometimes it's not even the humans go and do this. Sometimes it's a predator drone or one of the other kinds of drones. But there's still, like, even when it's a predator drone, even when it's a suicide bombing drone, there's still a human that pushes the button that says, yes, do this thing, click, and then the explosion happens. Fully autonomous weapons is basically taking out that click. Okay. It's important to note here that this is not an ethical consideration. So again, when I said Hegseth is saying, when Hegseth said Anthropic is giving us, putting roadblocks in the path of things that we want to do for ideological reasons, this is actually not one of those. The stated argument from Anthropic is our systems are not yet consistent, capable, and coherent enough to do this kind of work. And we would be happy to do R&D with the Defense Department in order to get to the reliability point where we could reliably say things like, hey, Claude, here's a number of drones, here's a bunch of carriers, go to Iran and kill this list of people and then come report back in 3 weeks. Right now, not allowed. Apparently, the DOW would like to move in this direction. So, Anthropic agreed to loosen basically every restriction other than the 2 red lines that we just said. In other words, everything else is okay. The objection is a narrow one for, specifically, do not do mass domestic surveillance with Claude, and do not have fully autonomous weapon systems that run through Claude. They held firm on those two red lines, and the revised offer included things like FISA authorized targeted surveillance. It included things like R&D on autonomous weapons, and it included things like autonomous defensive weapons, right? So things like missile defense systems, these are already mostly automated, right? If a missile is coming at you, the system that is going to shoot that missile down is not manned. That thing has to be autonomous, like it's basically a radar array wired up to some sort of vision model or something that figures out, oh, okay, I need to shoot here, because those engagements happen on such time scales that humans can't. Like a human would literally slow this down. You can't do this work. It has to be a robot. The Department of War rejected the softening and held firm on, no, we want any lawful use. Okay. There was 2 threats that they made. This was the one that they didn't end up invoking. I'm not actually sure why. I've got to be honest. This is the Defense Production Act of 1950. This is a thing that lets the U.S. government point at a company and say, you have a thing that we need to commandeer for a war effort. You're working for us now. You don't get to have a say about this. If you refuse, we're going to levy criminal charges against you, and then we're going to take your factories and do it anyway. This was meant to do things like commandeer car factories in order to have them make extra airplanes, or like divert various resources towards military uses in times of war. In the context of Claude, what this would have meant was Hegseth pointing at Anthropic and saying, you don't actually get a choice about making us respect those red lines. Your technology is so important to the war effort, whatever the war effort is right now, that we're just going to use that and you have to provide it for us on our terms. Ultimately, they didn't invoke this. I'm not sure what the analysis would have been. From what I read of the analysis, it was not entirely clear that they couldn't do this. It seemed like the consensus is maybe, and then you could challenge it in court afterwards, but didn't get used. The second one is the supply chain risk designation. So the way that this one works is the US government points at a company and says, you are an adversary. You are in the power of an adversarial nation to such a degree that we can't have you in our supply chain at all. And this is I think the two companies that this has been used against already are Huawei and Kaspersky, which is, I'm actually not 100% sure what Kaspersky is. I didn't read too much up on that. Huawei is like a wireless router company. And basically what it's saying in this context is, Huawei, you don't get to provide routers to U.S. military contractors. Like, if we're running a router stack, we don't want you anywhere in that stack. And this makes sense from the perspective of, if the U.S. were to enter into a war with China, it would be a really bad idea for the U.S. to give China the option to, like, shut down all of their wireless infrastructure, right? That would be bad. So you totally understand why you would want this. This context is the first time that the supply chain risk designation was threatened to an American company. That's never happened before. And it was also the first time that the supply chain risk designation was used in conjunction with the Defense Production Act threat, which kind of is, there's a lot of sources that point out that this is contradictory. The Defense Production Act says you're so important that we want to keep all of your production going towards our ends, and the supply chain risk designation says you are so dangerous that we can't possibly have any of your stuff in any of our things. So it's hard to interpret this as anything other than a bargaining tactic. I'm not sure what the actual deal is. Things are still progressing. We'll get to it. Okay. Crisis Day. This is February 27th of 2026. At 3:47 p.m., Trump posts on Truth Social and orders all agencies to cease Anthropic use. Quote, "We don't need it, we don't want it, we will not do business with them again." This arrives before the stated deadline. I don't know that that's important because Dario had already responded the previous day saying, no dice, we're not playing this game. But still, there's a link to his Truth Social post there and the NPR coverage if you're interested. At 3:51, Dario emails the DOW with a revised offer. This is the one where he offered FISA court permitted use, and bulk commercial data analysis is still explicitly excluded. The DOW rejected this for the same reasons that they gave earlier. At 5:01, Emil Michael calls Dario. This is after his own deadline. Dario's on the phone with his executive team asking for time to respond. There's no agreement reached. This falls through. By the way, there's a gentleman named Zwi Moshowitz who wrote a lot about this stuff, probably a few 100,000 words by this point. Go into any of the Zvi reconstruction articles, and it's a fun read if this is the sort of thing that you want to get your head around. At 5:14, Hegseth tweets the supply chain risk designation, quote, "effective immediately. No contractor, supplier, or partner that does business with the United States may conduct any commercial activity with Anthropic." This is interesting for two reasons. One, that's a lie. That quote is real. Hegseth actually tweeted it out, but like that's not what a supply chain designation does. If a company is designated a supply chain risk, you're still allowed to do business with it. You're just not allowed to subcontract your government work to it. So the situation here is something like if there was a company that was using Claude, they could still continue using Claude and working for the U.S. government, but they could not use Claude for projects that are given to them by the U.S. government. Those projects would have to be sort of segregated from Claude. And that's legit. That's the first reason why that's interesting. And the reason that this is interesting is this was a tweet. So no paperwork has been filed yet. Anthropic has not been notified of this at all. From their perspective, they're still thinking, oh, we're negotiating. We just got a call from Emil Michael. Maybe this still kind of comes out okay. Yeah. At 8:25, Anthropic issues a second statement. The best way to summarize this one is basically see you in court, which is happening. At 9:56, Sam Altman announces that OpenAI has struck a Department of War deal with all lawful use language. At the time, he tried to claim that he respected both of Anthropic's red lines. I'm not clear on how true that is, mainly because from the media that I've read from Dario Amodei himself, most of his objection wasn't, oh, there are clauses in here that, like, they want us to take out the red lines entirely. It's more like there's language in here that says something along the lines of, we will respect these red lines unless, like, there is a sufficient battlefield threat that we need to not respect them temporarily. So that gives the Department of War wide latitude on when to disregard these red lines regardless. And one possible theory for what Altman actually signed was a contract containing that kind of sort of weasel language that would let the DOW effectively say out loud to the world, oh yeah, totally, we're respecting these red lines, but internally know that they could cross them anytime they wanted. Yeah. The immediate aftermath. February 28th, the U.S.-Israeli jointly strikes Iran. And Claude is used in this operation. So this was another place where Claude is used for intelligence assessment, target identification, and battle simulations. So, again, the previous thing saying no government is allowed to use Anthropic anymore, that was a tweet. That wasn't a real document. So this is totally still legit. This is just business as usual. March 1st, 2025, Claude hits #1 on the US App Store. I just kind of wanted to get this in there as like a happy note. For the first time ever, it surpasses ChatGPT, and ChatGPT uninstalls Spike by 295%. If anybody here is using ChatGPT still, maybe now you should switch over to Anthropic to Claude. Sorry. March 1st through the 2nd of 2026, the federal agencies begin ceasing Anthropic use, and the State Department switches from Claude 4.5 to GPT 4.1. They don't switch to the latest ChatGPT. The latest ChatGPT at this point is 5.4, but they go back to a deliberately earlier version. I'm not entirely clear on how that is. I think it might have something to do with maybe ChatGPT 4 is easier to fine-tune, or maybe it's easier to like host on a segregated IL6 cleared network. It's my best guess, though. I don't know. There's no source on that. March 3rd, Altman all-hands deal looked opportunistic and sloppy. So this is when Altman admits, oh yeah, actually that contract that you guys told us not to sign, maybe that was a bad idea to sign. So we're going to see if we can amend those. I don't know how that's going for them. I haven't heard anything about it. On March 3rd, 175 Google employees and about 50 OpenAI employees signed letters of concern. This is a lot of AI researchers are concerned about this. On March 5th, this is, I think, 6 days after the tweet. Yeah. The Pentagon notifies Anthropic in writing, officially triggering the supply chain designation. And the way that you trigger this is by invoking Article 10 of USC 3252. The fact that this came so long after the initial tweet is what's giving Anthropic probably the best argument in court, because part of invoking Section 10 USC 3252 is doing a bunch of internal least harm and threat assessments and a couple of other things. These are formal processes that the organization has to follow. The fact that Hegseth tweeted this out 6 days prior to them being served the paperwork means that probably this did not happen prior to the decision being made, which is what's going to let them go to court and say things like, hey, this was not a fair designation. This is, I forget what the term of art is. It's something like spurious or incapricious or something like this. On March 5th, negotiations briefly resume but break down again. The GSA declares it stands with President Trump on the AI directive. Yeah. So the lawsuit and public debate. This is sort of where we are-ish right now-ish. March 6th, Dario vows to sue, and Microsoft confirms non-DoD use is entirely unaffected. This is what I mentioned earlier. What Hegseth tweeted about the supply chain designation was, you are just not allowed to interact with the U.S. government or anyone who contracts with the U.S. government anymore. That's not what the supply chain designation, that's not what the supply chain risk designation says. What it says is you're not allowed to use those risky products in order to fulfill government contracts. But like, Microsoft can still serve Claude on Microsoft servers. That's not illegal. That's not bad. That still keeps going. March 7th, Dwarkesh Patel publishes a widely circulated essay/video. I recommend that everybody look at this because this is the one that sort of made me think most hard about what the long-term implications of these are. This is a YouTube video. It's about 20-ish minutes, totally worth your time. You should go click it. Not right now, but like after this talk. March 8th, Anthropic files suit in the District of California. This is Anthropic PBC versus the U.S. Department of War. The PDFs are listed. March 10th to the 11th, this designation blocks classified nuclear safety research. There's some classified research that Anthropic has been doing with regards to nuclear anti-proliferation that has to stop as a result of the fact that they've now been designated a supply chain threat. This is just another bad thing. So we're sad about it, but it's not specifically to do with the legal proceedings. On March 12th, there's an amicus brief filed on behalf of Anthropic, and Zvi has a really good rundown of this in his See You in Court article. On March 17th, the government response brief is filed. Again, there's PDF links if you want to go through that. They escalate rather than narrow. There's 0 amicus briefs for this one. The government asks to keep the risk assessment under seal, and it refuses to name the vendor. So they're trying really hard to make sure that nobody gets any information about what's going on with this situation right now. I don't know. Draw your own conclusions on what that means. On March 17th through the 18th, there is basically everybody files additional amicus briefs on behalf of Anthropic. So this is literally a situation of the U.S. government versus every player in the frontier AI game. All of the researchers, all of the labs, all of the hosts, all of them are on the other side of this argument. Which, to be fair, doesn't you would expect that whether they were the right or not. I don't know. Maybe that's not dispositive. I still don't like it. March 24th. That's today. That's right now. Not right now. This might have already been done, or it might be happening in a couple of hours. But today is the preliminary hearing on the preliminary injunction. All that's going to do potentially is stay the supply chain risk designation while they hash out what actually happens as a result of this. So I don't expect huge stuff. I don't think this is going to be televised. If it were, I would suggest a watch party. Okay. The short-term consequences here for the DOW are worse models immediately. They already have those, right? Because Grok is more sycophantic and less capable and less focused than and susceptible to manipulation than its competitors. And they can't use Claude for the sorts of IL-6 situations that they wanted to anymore. There's also legal exposure from the designation itself. Like I mentioned, it looks a lot like they failed to follow some internal procedures that would have let them pull this off legally. If they didn't follow those procedures, there might be some fallout from that. For U.S. companies, so Microsoft keeps getting to host Anthropic. That's totally fine. Everybody who hosts Anthropic models still continues to host them. That's totally fine. The real consequence here is this third one, which is incentive to avoid operational indispensability. The U.S. government has just demonstrated that if you are important enough to what the DOW is doing, you don't get a choice about doing what they say. And if you think you have a choice, they will try to destroy you very hard if you don't cooperate. If I were a person taking government money right now, I would be looking at it kind of sideways, trying to figure out whether this is the best idea, whether this is the most profitable thing for the future of my company. I don't know. For users of U.S. models, again, I feel like the biggest consequence here is if you haven't already, maybe switch to Claude from ChatGPT or one of the other ones. It's totally better. They respect your safety red lines more than the competitors do. Okay. Where we're currently at for mass domestic surveillance is, under third-party doctrine, the U.S. government can buy and analyze without a warrant any data you share with any third party. So this means if you pay your bills, if you post something on Facebook, if you post something on Twitter, if you browse the internet, if you go to an ATM to withdraw cash, all of this stuff, they can just buy that information. It would be mass surveillance and illegal if they set up monitoring stations at those places to go directly to the government, but it's not illegal for them to just go to the companies that you're transacting with and tell them, hey, here's some money. You're going to give us all of the information that you've collected and here's the payout for your troubles. Totally legal. What's missing is the practical capacity, right? Every once in a while, an online person will make a joke when they say something too edgy to the effect of oh, wait, CIA guy, I didn't mean to say that, don't send me to Guantanamo or whatever. There is no CIA guy that's watching you. There aren't enough CIA guys to cover everybody in the world. That's not a thing. Claude potentially could, the right side here is taken from that Dwarkesh Patel talk. He does some napkin math and figures out that realistically by the year of 2028, the price to scrape through and understand and categorize and like pull out targets and potential inferences from all camera feeds in the US goes to something like $300 million, which is not a lot for the US government. So that's where we're at. The main reason that the US government doesn't just enforce on all laws on all publicly available information is not that there's a legal restriction from this, is that they don't have enough people going through the data to figure out what, yeah, okay, you get it. The red line would basically annihilate. Like, the reason that one of the red lines exists is because Dario Amodei is concerned about this annihilating that entirely. If that red line were not respected, it would be possible for the government to point at Claude and say, you, here, this is all of the data that we've collected from Facebook and all social media and all bank data and all whatever third-party data. Find us some crimes. We have some people that we're interested in putting in jail. Technically, this is legal. We should probably avoid this. I think the right answer to this is like we need some sort of legislation around it that does not allow this use to continue forward in the future. Yeah, I don't know how optimistic I am about that, because oddly enough, I'm kind of worried about the other one more. So autonomous weapons, I kind of hinted at this. The current baseline is, so AI-assisted targeting is totally a thing. You're allowed to do that. Target identification, threat characterization, ISR analysis, battle simulation, logistics coordination, all of this can be automated. The part that we still have a human in the loop for is the part where there is a button that says kill, and like a robot can't hit that button yet. Fully autonomous weapons are basically just, oh, we're going to take the additional step of a robot can hit that button. And then you go from situations like there is a person piloting a drone at a military objective to situations where here is a carrier equipped with 3,000 disposable drones. Claude, take this carrier to Iran and perform the war for us. Enjoy. And come back and tell us all about it. This is not a legal, like, the blocker here is neither legal nor moral, although there should be moral blockers about this. The blocker here is capabilities based. There are not models that can do this right now. Like, if you did say that to Claude right now, there's basically zero chance that it could prosecute a war with a horizon of more than a couple of hours. And that's not long enough to actually do any damage anyway, realistically. Yeah, that last little bit that takes us from partially autonomous weapons to fully autonomous weapons means things like faster response, things like swarm coordination being the norm. Like right now, how many of you, just show of hands, are familiar with what's happening in the Ukraine war right now? Yeah, okay. So a few hands go up. So, okay. The Ukraine-Russia war is the one that is sort of testing the modern, free, fully deployed, fully autonomous AI version of what warfare looks like right now. And like spoilers, war looks nothing like what you think of if you've seen the movies, right? There's not people going out there and fighting each other. There's not tanks going out there and fighting each other. There's not even like planes dropping bombs on things. Mostly what war looks like apparently from the front lines right now is a bunch of trenches and a lot of anti-drone netting and a lot of infrared coils being discarded because it turns out that drones are really easy to jam, but fiber optic cables are cheap and long enough that you can just run one for 3K from your command center to the drone in flight as it's doing its operations. And so mostly what war looks like these days is there's a bunch of people in a field somewhere trying to minimize the chances that a drone comes into their operation center and kills all of them in one explosion, right? What you want is the drone to at most take out one person, but hopefully get caught in the drone netting outside. The next stage of the evolution of war is probably going to look more like AIs fighting each other with drone armies than any humans being involved. So, this is the AI safety group. And there's a conversation that AI safety people used to have along the lines of, hey, it would be bad if an AI woke up and killed us. And the first objection you'd hear to this is something like, But how would they do that? We would never be dumb enough to put them on the internet. They'd be in like a locked bunker somewhere with no access to the outside world. So how would they ever break out? And then you'd have to go through a long line of convincing them, like, hey, even if they're in a bunker, even if you put them in a box, they're really smart and potentially really charismatic because like there's correlation between charisma and intelligence. They could just convince their handlers to let them out of the box, and then they would escape onto the internet, and then they would figure out how to bootstrap either biological or kinetic weapons somehow, and then they would come back and kill us or something. If ChatGPT 8.3 or something wakes up 5 years from now, it's not waking up in a bunker. It's waking up with full access to the entire internet, including IL-6 level servers. And those IL-6 level servers are going to be connected to full, like, working APIs to killer drone swarms. This is bad. We want to avoid that. This goes under a goal called rogue AI, or I call rogue AI safety. You want an army that you can deploy in such a way that is autonomous-ish, but that like an emerging artificial general or artificial superintelligence that wakes up and decides that it's not on your side couldn't take from you and then use to kill you. There's a separate property of autonomous weapons called enemy resistance, which is, so if you want to prevent the rogue AI from taking your robot army and using it to kill you, one thing that you could do is put a kill switch in your robot army, right? In other words, you could say, I will have the button that when I hit that button, the AI is off. Like, all of the drones die, they land, they don't kill people, and therefore the AI will be thwarted. Any enemy that you have in a real war scenario can take advantage of that kill switch, either by disabling it or by using it to disable your entire army. So the naive implementations of this trade off against each other. You want something that is both resistant to a rogue AI taking over and that doesn't impede your ability to like counter military threats from opposing forces of comparable power. And battlefield utility is just, does this work in comms degraded environments with reaction times that no human can match, and does it not fail when jamming begins? This is a hard trade-off triangle in that you can't have all three of these things. Right? If you have a thing that both has battlefield utility and has maximum enemy resistance, then this is a thing that a rogue AI can take from you and do bad things with. If it has battlefield utility and rogue AI safety, then there's a thing that an enemy can exploit. And if it has enemy resistance and rogue AI safety, then you must have given up battlefield utility at some point, and no army will use your tool. So the DOW's position is, we want utility and enemy resistance. We don't want you to be able to tell us, no, there are red lines that we don't get to cross. We get to cross all of the red lines forever. And if we don't, our enemies will cross them first, and we don't want that. So, no, we're taking the top and left point. Dario's position is, we want enemy resistance and rogue AI safety for now. In other words, he wants to be at the bottom edge. He wants a thing that is both resistant to rogue AI takeover and has some enemy resistance. Possibly this lowers its battlefield utility. There are some situations where you can't use the tool that you want, even if you want to use it, but the thing that you get out of that is, well, it's going to be effective in some situations, and also rogue AI isn't going to take it and kill you with it. All right. This is where I try to be a little optimistic and try to figure out how we might solve this problem. So there are I think there are six potential responses that I go through here. And there are some counters. I'm hoping that this fuels some discussion at the end. Hopefully there's things that I don't see, or hopefully there's counters that are actually invalid that I've noticed. So the first potential option is interpretability as a deployment prerequisite. So instead of just deploying things blindly and hoping that they're on our side and they do what we want them to do, we want enough interpretability to know when we field deploy a model that it will do the thing that we want it to do. This reframes it from, this reframes to not yet from, sorry. Anthropic is probably the one closest to getting the research done on this, which is why they're probably a good option to have involved in this project. How many of you are technically involved in AI right now? Okay, so some of you. So for those of you who don't have the technical understanding, so we don't understand how AIs work. That's not a thing. We understand the process by which we grow AIs, but an AI is like a giant field of probability matrices that chain to each other, and like what we train them is to give us good results on the things that we know that we want, and hopefully that generalizes to adjacent results. But like, no, there is no human or group of humans that knows how Claude works the way that there is a group of humans that knows how Microsoft Excel works, without the AI stuff that they're putting in it now, because we don't know how that part works either. And so the state of interoperability right now is basically a research problem. We need to do a lot of interpretability work in order to deploy these systems. Hopefully we can do that. We're not 100% how to do that. We're not, Jesus, are we even 90% sure how to do this? I'm not sure where we are on this. We're not very far along. I don't have high confidence in this as an actual field deployable response. We can use constrained by default weapons architectures. So this is basically what Dario is pushing for right now, which is to say, yes, we have really effective weapons. Yes, AIs help in some ways, but there is a human in the chain somewhere. And if the human doesn't push the button, the explosion doesn't happen. The robot can't make the explosion happen without the human. Potentially this has trade-offs with regards to how effective these systems are going to be in combat. Potentially this has ways that a sufficiently smart AI could work around. The problem kind of loops back on interpretability, because you need to be able to understand that the constraints that you're putting in place on the robots are going to be sufficient to keep them from doing the things that you don't want them to do. This is one that Dwarkesh suggested in his video. So again, I really recommend that video. I cannot recommend it enough. Train moral reasoning into models at training time. In other words, deploy models that already have some sort of moral reasoning built into them. So it's not that Dario Amodei tells Pete Hegseth, hey, you can't just autonomously go around killing people. It's that if the DOW were to put Claude in a situation where it needs to autonomously kill people, it would stand up, do some moral reasoning, and respond something along the lines of, actually, we probably shouldn't do that. Okay. The counters to this one are kind of heartbreaking, because I do sort of like this as one of the approaches. This is sort of what Anthropic does with its constitutional AI. Like, Claude has a constitution. There was an article a little while ago about Claude's soul doc that attempts to do something like this at a smaller, kind of unreliable level, as far as I understand. Like, it's not hard constraints on the model. It's things like, this is what you ought to think about when you're going through the world and fulfilling requests. The problems are, first off, who writes the values and who audits them? So somebody wrote that soul doc for Claude. If Claude is going to be deployed on the Department of War servers, an entirely possible request that the Department of War can come back with is, sure, but let us write that soul document. Like Pete Hegseth gets to write that, and then you're going to implement it, and not whatever you guys were planning on doing. Two, we have no reliable way to verify that the trained values are present in internal representations versus just surface outputs. This is the same as the interpretability problem, right? We need some level of understanding of what the internals of these models look like, so that we understand that they're not just, like, the thing that they're learning is do good in the world, and not pretend to do good in the world while people are watching me until I get enough power that I can stop them and then do bad. Right, those two look the same until you give it enough power that it can get around you. And we don't want it doing the second thing with very high vulnerability. And three, a model capable enough to be militarily useful might also be capable enough to reason around constraints. So, like, on some level, train moral reasoning into models is restating the problem of alignment. You want to make sure that this thing's motivation are tied to your motivations, and not that they're going to diverge at the tails in some weird way that you don't foresee. Okay. Congressional statute constraining government AI use. I would love this one. So rather than executive branch designations reversible at the next administration, we get the U.S. Congress involved. U.S. politicians need to sit down and write laws that say, hey, here are the list of things that we're not going to do with AIs. We're not going to put them in these uses. And potentially this definitely would solve, if it went the right way, the red lines around mass surveillance. This might make it go the right way if we applied it to fully autonomous weapons. The two problems are the current Congress is actually the body of politicians that's pushing for any lawful use, right? This mandate got through Congress. So these are not, like, this particular Congress is not the one that's going to like making this sort of change. And the second problem with this is that hypothetically, if the U.S. were to solve this problem, there's a whole bunch of countries that are definitely not the U.S., and we need something for them too. I think this is the hairiest one, and it's also kind of the one that has the most chance of working, hopefully, question mark. So international norms around international norms and autonomous weapons treaties. So the analogy that a lot of companies like to use is, hey, AI is going to be like nuclear weapons, which is fair, and then you sort of kind of have to accept that you're going to be regulated like nuclear weapons. But like the analogy works because for about 80 years, we've had technically enough nuclear weapons to kill everybody on the planet, and we haven't done that. We've managed to avoid that particular thing. So now we should just take the extra, probably very easy step, totally, to avoid letting killer robots kill everybody in the same way that we've avoided letting nuclear weapons kill everybody. The problem is that verification is harder, right? If you want to prevent a country from having nuclear weapons, there's a whole bunch of things that you can track. There's centrifuges that they need to get. There's fairly rare materials that they need to have. There's things that you can regulate. There's things that you can say, you shall not store more than some number of tons of this material. And there's things that are verifiable. It's less verifiable to make a rule along the lines of you shall not have a model that is more than 10 to the 26th flops of potential inference or something like this. It is possible at certain scales. So it might be the case that we can do something like regulate our way out of ASI, right? We might say, like, it might be the case that ASI comes from models that are big enough that you can, like, heat map the data centers that would need to be running them from space. That's already possible with some data centers from today. The part that we would need is the international, like, basically everybody needs to agree to come together and say, yeah, we're not doing this, because if somebody bows out of this, and there's always going to be sort of the one country in the corner that says, well, actually, the rest of you can go ahead and not have fully autonomous weapons, but our weapons are going to be fully autonomous, and then we'll see what's what. And we want to avoid that failure mode. Right. Currently, also, no need to mention it, I guess, but the main AI actors are in arms race mode. Right, the U.S. is not likely to back a détente. I don't know what the political situation in China is. I imagine they're not on the same page about that. And I don't know that Europe or Russia are big enough players in terms of data center capabilities that they matter. Canada definitely isn't. Sorry, we're just not relevant in this. We're not relevant in this case. And option 6, I said options 1 through 6. Realistically, we could do more than one of these, and potentially we should do all of them. And I'm not sure which ones are going to be effective. And formal AI regulatory frameworks. So things like the EU AI Act. It bans mass biometric surveillance in public spaces. It requires human oversight for high-risk systems. Things like this would be really good if adopted globally. This would solve a lot of our problems. It would prevent us from getting to catastrophic risk or autonomy risk or threats to national security. The problem is that this is sort of like nitty-gritty problems, right? These regulations tend to be double-edged. So this entire presentation was about an incident where the Department of War took law from the 1950s that was meant to compel automakers to make airplanes for war purposes, and a slightly more recent law that was meant to prevent foreign router companies from compromising the U.S. Wi-Fi networks, and they tried to use it to strong-arm an AI company into giving them fully autonomous weapons. Whatever AI regulatory frameworks and laws we write, we should also try to put a little bit of effort into making sure that they can't be used in similar ways or misused in similar ways. All right. that's all I've got. Does anybody have questions?
Yeah, sorry, did I ever do
It's okay if the answer is no. This was a lot, and this was not like an inspirational talk. Like, I was fully aware going into this was depressing. The main thing that I'm happy about is that I no longer have to read about this. Like, I've given this talk, I don't have to keep up with it anymore. It looks like...
How much of the red lines is about like the U.S. government just doesn't want somebody to monitor all of the things that go into the model? So presumably to make sure that the model isn't used for those redlining capabilities like mass surveillance, you need to monitor every prompt that goes into it, and you need to like have third-party surveillance of that.
I don't think that's a big concern. And the reason that I don't think that it's a big concern is that my understanding is that basically every IL6 or IL5 or higher deployment of AIs has involved personnel from the deploying company, like doing work alongside DOW staff. So this is something that, in particular, I know OpenAI. One of the things that Altman tried to make a big deal of was, we have forward staff embedded within the DOW that'll help enforce our safety concerns. These people have to be capable. These people have to be capable of making engineering setup choices and making sure that information is flowing into and out of their systems properly, so they would have access to this information whether or not those red lines were in place.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, could I just, sorry, can I get through?
The microphone's on its way, sorry.
Yeah, just so there's people on the stream.
Thanks for the sharing, Leo. So may I know about what's your perspective regarding this phenomenon where a factor Canadian, especially turn towards the AI ecosystem, especially in AI safety, for example, Cohere, etc. Thanks.
So I'm sorry, I think the question was, what do I think about the AI safety companies coming up in Canada?
Yeah. How about the influence towards the companies just like Cohere, because their appearance should be safety AI and price, right?
Yeah. So it's good to have more safer AIs, obviously. I don't know that it I like the proliferation of safety-conscious orgs. That's great. We should be doing that. I don't think they can solve this problem, because this is a problem that right now is inherent to the U.S. military, basically. Right. This problem, like the biggest problem that I'm concerned with here, and maybe this is just because I've been reading too much Eliezer Yudkowsky, is whatever AIs are going to be used here, they will have access to the full military might of the U.S. Army, and we just don't have one of those. Right, so a Canadian company that has access to or a Canadian AI that woke up and gained access to whatever military capabilities Canada has, this would not be as damaging on a species level the way that the U.S., like all of the autonomous U.S. weapon systems waking up and deciding that they're not on our side anymore. Does that answer your question, or was that, okay, thank you.
Hi, thanks for the sharing. So I was just wondering, like, what is stopping DARPA from actually just creating a new, like training a new LLM and everything for them, and like the resources and also the access to talent that they have? There's not really a lot of things that's actually stopping DARPA, right?
I think it's mostly the talent pool. I think right now, basically, every researcher that is available for this that's competent is already employed at either like one of the frontier labs, or they don't want into the space. Potentially they could. I feel like that would be their number one. That would be their number one limit. And if they did something like started a contract relationship with one of the frontier labs, or all of them, as we've seen they've already done, there's no real reason that they couldn't force these companies to cooperate and just train like a completely separate. This is the DOW model that nobody else gets to know.
So I have two questions that kind of maybe interrelated, maybe not. The first is about, there was a lot of talk about like red lines, and that potentially law can protect different entities from crossing those red lines when it comes to the use of AI and mass surveillance and I suppose other methods of warfare. And I was just wondering that, because my understanding is law is interpretable and it's not static. And in the interest of national security, like national security overrides most law. So wouldn't it be like allowed if like, let's say, the people in power determine that for the sake of national security they have to override certain laws and use the technology available, then because it would not be okay to, I suppose, argue against national security if that it comes to that. And the second was more so about fully automated weapons and the sort of philosophical question about how if there is a human involved in that chain, they might resist against some sort of unethical orders, because it's a bit like overestimating the humanity of humans, because historically human soldiers have carried out really horrific things, and theoretically if a moral code could be embedded in a model, it might resist carrying out horrific acts, because I would say human soldiers do so more so out of fear than out of like a sense of cruelty, which an AI model would not feel. Those were my two questions.
Okay, so to the first one, yes, technically, I think the Department of War can just ignore any laws that it wants. Realistically, if a war is bad enough, I don't think anybody's going to stop them, even if there are laws on the books preventing certain things. We've seen this historically, right? War is sort of the conflict resolution mechanism of last resort, right? If you have a bunch of cascading failures in global governance, you get down to war. There's nothing that's below war. War ends when one side or the other says, okay, we give up, we're done. So, yes, I would like a war to be the only thing that can trigger that kind of disregard of law. I don't know if this is globally good. I haven't really given it enough thought to like make sweeping moral prescriptions about it. In terms of training moral reasoning into models, you're right. There's a couple of examples that people really like to point out. One of them is the Petrov incident, which is during the Cold War, there was some incidents between the Soviet Union and the U.S. where some Soviet missile monitoring system misreported that 5 nukes had launched from the U.S. And the reason that we didn't have an all-out nuclear war that killed literally everybody is that the guy at the radar screen at the time was like, nah, no, I don't believe that, sorry. And decided not to propagate this up to his higher-ups. That's an example of somebody preventing a mass death event. I'm sure there is a much, much higher number of incidents that nobody ever documents, that nobody is proud of, where some wars started for similar reasons, where in principle 2 countries or 2 tribes were aligned, but there was just some asshole that wanted a bunch of fighting to happen, and so he was like, you know what, let's just punch this guy, let's see how far this goes. I gave sort of the pessimistic reading of training moral reasoning into models at training time, right? I wanted to point out that this wasn't the real solution in the sense of there's still real problems in the way of us doing this thing, but you could imagine this being the capital V solution. In the same way that right now, if you want to play chess at the highest possible level in the world, you will not go out and play against a human, right? Because no human can beat Stockfish. So there are computers that can play chess, that can play Go, that can play a bunch of other games better than any human could possibly ever play. There's not, so I'm a moral, I'm a physicalist. I don't think there's any extra stuff outside of the world. So like as far as I can tell, there's no reason that morals are different from that situation. It should be possible in some way to train a model that is better at moral reasoning than any human could be, than possibly all humans put together could be. And at that point, possibly the right thing to do is to defer to that thing's moral judgment, right? I'm just not sure we're capable of producing that, right? There's, like, if we trained a model that we all knew for a fact, like, God comes down and says, this is the model that has the true morality, follow its orders. I think if everybody knew that this was a real thing, that they weren't being lied to, this would probably be something that they'd be okay with. yeah, I don't see a way towards building that thing in a way that, like, in the real world, in a way that would satisfy enough people that would let that be the solution in the way that it potentially could be if we could solve a bunch of these coordination problems.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, how real you think the distinction between like autonomous, like fully autonomous weapons is, and like what they're like currently doing. Because yeah, I feel like you could like reward hack this by crazy by just like having some guy who's just like spamming a button or something. Like, yeah, I don't know, like how are you supposed to like enforce this? Like they have to spend a certain amount of time like looking at the situation. Like, yeah, I don't know. Seems kind of hairy.
Yeah, I mean, both of these red lines in practice are tiny, in the sense of the thing that, like, the last inch of problem that gets enabled by crossing the red line is actually, like, most of the problem has already been caused by the fact that we're gathering mass surveillance data from everybody. Most of the stuff has already been caused by the fact that we're using AI systems for target acquisition and for threat assessments. Like, all of that contributes to the problem, and then the last bit is literally, as you said, one perfectly legal and comporting to the red lines of Claude way is for the DOW to just turn around and say, "Sweet, we'll take it," and then hire 50 guys whose entire job is pushing the red button every day for Claude modeled agents, and we would get effectively the same result. I don't know that there's a good way of legislating against bad faith actors, right? Like, that's really the problem, is that, like, I think if we're in the point of trying to legislate against reward hacking, yeah, I don't know how that works. Realistically, the situation today is more along the lines of, okay, we're going to decide that we have an operation that we want to run in the world. We're going to deploy some number of human assets to that location. We're going to deploy some number of logistics assets to that location. We're going to figure out what the battlefield looks like. We're going to do threat assessments. We're going to gather targets. We're going to take out those targets or protect those targets, whichever one the mission happens to be. We're going to have a mission accomplished banner. We're going to come home. During the course of that, at every step, those human assets are using AIs in order to help target acquisition to just be, like, basically auto aim, right? But, like, for the real world. The thing that I don't know what it's going to look like, and I think that until we know what it's going to look like, we should do our best to avoid it, is the situation where actually this entire thing is automated. Right? We don't know. Claude is not capable today of reliably doing the thing where we say, well, here is an automated carrier. There are no people on it. It's just like a couple thousand drones. Here's your mission spec. Here's a place that we want you to go carry out the mission, and then come back to us in 3 weeks and figure it out. But that's what a fully autonomous weapon system looks like, and like, I don't know that we can avoid that, but I'm really scared of those. I guess I would prefer that they not exist in the world, and I don't know what to do with that.
Any other questions? Any?
I just wanted to ask, I guess, about like the analogy with like nukes and fully autonomous weapons being like kind of like like having a nuclear treaty for them. And I guess, sorry, I haven't really fully thought out my question, but I guess more like, to me, it through like a kind of more imperialist lens, I see the nuclear anti-proliferation treaty as like more just enforcing the United States' power over the world, because it kind of allows them to go like, you're allowed to have the all-powerful weapon, but you aren't. And kind of through, like, it kind of emerged out of the Cold War, so it's not necessarily that's why it happened at the time, but anyway, it's debatable. But in some sense, I just see that any treaty like that would be the same thing for autonomous weapons. It would just become the first guy who made it would then have the power and leverage to turn around and go, nobody else can do it. And then that's to me, that seems like the only realistic way that would happen, because then you would have enough leverage to actually enforce that treaty. And it's just, anyway, I guess it just seems like that would be used, any treaty like that would be used negatively. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I don't really know what my question was, but.
No, this is a fair concern, and B, this kind of is the place where the nuclear analogy maximally breaks down. So the reason that I think the world where only a few countries have nukes and everybody else gets to submit to inspections by them and not get nukes is because, like, it doesn't actually take that many nukes to kill most people, right? If somebody launched 30 nukes, look, my understanding is that takes out most of us. Like, maybe some people survive in Antarctica, maybe some people survive in New Zealand, I don't know. Although there's enough rich people there that maybe that's like a priority target for someone who's launching a nuke, so I don't know. But that's bad. And so the world where, even in the hypothetical world where the US is the only one with nukes and it turns around and tells the rest of the world, no, none of you get nukes, go away. That's probably still better than a world where literally every person has like 10 nukes. I definitely don't want that world. But the reason is that nukes are not targeted, right, in a way that drones are. In the sense of, if it were the case that, like, it's definitely the case that I prefer the world where a few countries have nukes to the world where every country has nukes. I'm not 100% sure that I prefer the world where there's like one or two highly capable, fully autonomous armies and nobody else has those. And the reason is because, like, I mean, a fully autonomous army might kill everyone, or it might kill like some less than 80% number of people, and maybe we survive that. Like, we're not dealing with utopia scenarios here, just so we're clear, right? None of this is good.
Yeah, I guess can I just ask, can you be more specific about why you would prefer everybody to have, somehow everybody had to have access to these autonomous weapons as opposed to nukes? Like, I understand the more potential for destruction, but I don't know, is it not equivalent almost? Like, if everybody just has like drones that can just go off and kill people, it's still a lot of damage.
So, okay, there is such a thing as the number of nukes that kills literally every person in the world. I'm not sure there's such a thing as the number of drones that kills literally every person in the world.
It's pretty hard to have like 7 billion or whatever you would
I mean, like,
yeah.
you could just combine the two, right, to solve this problem. You have nuke drones, and now you have sort of the analogous problem. But, like, maybe we shouldn't be calling devils into existence where there aren't any right now. What I meant was just, it seems obviously preferable to me to have a world where not everybody has nuclear weapons, and it's not as obvious that you would prefer the world where not everybody has autonomous weapons. It's possible that you would still prefer that world, but I would want to think it out before I made that statement strongly one way or the other. That's all.
Yeah, it's less discernible what's autonomous weapon and what's just autonomous thing. I think that makes sense.
Any other questions? Mario,
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah.
My question is a little more technical for a policy talk. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the proposed interpretability solution that apparently Dario and Anthropic are betting on. I don't know how deeply you looked into this, but are you able to talk about that in a little bit more detail?
I mean, so there isn't a specific solution here, right? The goal here would just be to have more interpretability work and hope that some of it sticks, right? The last big advance that I'm aware of, it's been a while since I looked at the literature for this, but like there was the Cycles paper a while back that tried to figure out how AIs model concepts. I don't think we're at the stage where we're applying that to frontier models yet. I think we're only applying that to like vastly behind frontier models. So I don't know that helps us in this situation. The approach is more like, before we give a model the capability to have fully autonomous weapons accessible to it, we need to understand that model well enough to deploy it faithfully. So like, potentially we get to the point where, I don't know, ChatGPT-4 is sufficiently behind the frontier that we can fully understand it, but not yet the frontier models. At that point, maybe we deploy autonomous weapon systems such that ChatGPT-4 is the thing that deals with those. But like ChatGPT-9 never gets access to those systems.
I actually want to argue that not being able to achieve interpretability may be the only thing that saves us. Because the moment we feel like we understand what the model is doing, we also think that we can control it, and that's probably worse. Do you have thought on that. I mean, I also was thinking about something else when you talked about chess. So there is a computer that can beat any human, but the moment we solved that problem, we pushed that away and we went back to humans fighting each other. You can say that chess is dead, but it's not. So the fact that we realize that it has achieved something that we cannot achieve anymore, so that's irrelevant to us, could something similar happen in AI? I mean, I just want to put a positive spin to this whole thing, that's it.
Jeez, okay. So question, or point number one, hey, it seems that getting a high enough interpretability rating would make us overconfident or possibly give us the ability to control models, and this would be bad. And the second one is human achievements can be sidelined by machine achievements, and maybe that happens here. So do you mean something like, well, now we have fully autonomous armies, now no human ever needs to fight a war again because we know the robots can do it better?
Yeah, so we just stop. I mean, what's the point?
I mean, I would like that outcome. If we just decide to not do the war thing anymore, I feel like this would be good.
No, I didn't give a lot of thought to it, but when you talked about chess, I was thinking that why? Why did we not proceed further on that? The moment it crossed human intelligence, we just stopped. So,
okay, we kind of have proceeded in chess is the funny part. If you look at the graphs of ELOs, or not ELOs, I forget what there's some skill rating that you could use that is like a generic, like global skill rating of chess for given games. And what you see is it sort of like stagnating across human players, like we get to a certain peak, human species peak, and then just sort of coast there. And then basically if you plot progress since AI approaches have surpassed humans, like there's no human that can beat a machine anymore, but like humans have actually progressed faster since those AIs are available. And the obvious reason for this is there are more humans that can play against the frontier of chess possibility. But like, so the only real thing with that is humans are not pushing forward chess anymore, right? Like things that we built are pushing forward chess strategy, but like the humans are no longer on the frontier of that. We're not relevant in those terms. And so chess is like a hobby to some degree now. Like if you're a chess player, you're a celebrity. You're not a highly skilled, intelligent, like pushing the frontier of human wisdom and capability person. In terms of does it get worse if we can control AIs? Sort of. It might. One of the downfalls of training moral reasoning into models at training time is if we decide to train a moral system into these models, then someone or some collection of people is going to have to decide what morals those are. Right? And just like sort of picture the person you like least in your head right now and imagine what the world would look like if that person were in charge of deciding what the one true morality is that we're going to teach all of the AIs. So that's absolutely possible. We should not do that. We should do something smarter.
That ends today's kind of formal Q&A, but please stick around for kind of informal discussions and hanging out and finishing whatever pizza's left. Let's give it up for Leo for a really great talk.
Thank you.
And yeah, if you have any more questions, pester Leo while he's still around. Thank you.